enough by identifying them. Once you've identified them, you can segregate them. Once you segregate them, they can only go into shops at certain times of day. You can only buy certain products. You can only smoke in certain areas. You move down that to a certain degree, you start moving things up, and over time, as these things become acceptable, we've lifted up. Eventually to the fact of, would you mind just leaving your, we know you've had a long journey, would you just mind leaving your clothes on the peg, and remember the number on your peg later on, and go and have a nice shower. Nobody would have thought anything different. And anybody who did expose that was seen to be some kind of conspiracy theorist or freak. And yet history shows us the same. And now we've had Rwanda, we've had China, we've had Russia, far bigger scale than we ever saw with Hitler.
If you can tailor a vaccine to a genome, you have a eugenics program. It's like the thing that can cure can kill. So the question is, why is IBM doing this? And history has played itself out, and it's playing itself out again, and the motives have not changed. It is exactly the same motives, and I guess the purpose of the research is to showcase when IBM actually went to market to get the DNA from people, they hid behind National Geographic. So it wasn't IBM that went into market. They went, let's find out where your lineage comes from. Let's find out where the African tribes are. Are you African? Are you South American? And what it was a cloak and dagger military operation to get people to hand over your DNA. Like, I mean, this is your DNA we're talking about. And you're going to trust it with documented Nazi war criminals? Like, I'm speechless sometimes.
Yes, it's true. The elite are big into eugenics, which could be, here in Texas, we'd say, who's your daddy? Okay? And they have the idea, this was all started by aristocrats and people who thought that the ruling classes somehow had more brain power and somehow were more capable of running the world than just the other commoners. And of course, this is a very dangerous philosophy. For one thing, all you have to do is look back through history. You find some of the most shining examples: Beethoven, Mozart. Some of the greatest minds in history came from poor background. And when you do press this agenda of trying to establish a ruling aristocracy that can run the planet, then all you have to do is look at the Hitler's Nazi regime to see the end result, because then it started slowly. Well, we need to get the mental defectives and the people who are too ill out of circulation, which they did, and then they began to say, well, we don't want a breeding, so they began their sterilization program. And finally they said, well, we just got to get rid of the real riffraff, so they started their euthanasia program, and pretty soon they were marching people into the ovens at the concentration camps. This is what comes of that type of thinking.
People like George Orwell were talking basically about bar-coded people. Other people who've talked about this in novels or said, in statements to various people that this is what's coming, because they know. They have, over the decades, predicted technology or predicted changes in society that required technology, like the microchip, that no one even thought of in the mainstream then.
For me, when I actually saw VeriChip going into market and testing the waters in regards to, the human microchip, what I actually did is I sat back and I saw, like, here's a company that's actually going to market with a human implantable microchip. And the event itself was publicised, televised, and from my perspective I thought, okay, here we have, human beings actually being reduced to inventory, right? And what's going to happen? So I gauged the feedback. I thought, the church is going to revolt, civil libertarians just going to go crazy. Are we going to burn the building down, right? And nothing happened. Nothing happened. So that's how the movement was born. It was a case of not something that I really wanted to do. It was just something that had to be done because the structures or the people that, you know, we think are looking after us realistically aren't. Because when you look at constitutional lawyers, you look at the church system, you look at civil libertarians, and there's few of them around the world. This is the final frontier of human tracking, and for it to be dismissed when it's the same company that's manufacturing a microchip for your dog, right, spins a company off to put a chip in a human, like, just wake up, folks.
Well, already we have RFID ink, so therefore we have the ability to tattoo rather than implant chips. So when I say implanting chips, think of pets. So your pet's escaped, you don't know where the pet is, we need to be able to track it, someone finds the pet. Being able to work out where that pet is something that most people would do. It's almost normal now to microchip animals. There's reasons for microchipping criminals, for microchipping Alzheimer's or people who don't have any motor control over their bodies. There's reasons to sort of chip all sorts of different people, from clubbers in Spain to officials in Mexican governments, to all sorts of different security reasons as to why it may be a good idea. And there's lots of arguments for and why these things should happen, and we start thinking, well, would I want to carry a microchip around in me?
A few years ago, the Hollywood documentarist Aaron Russo was approached by Nicholas Rockefeller, one of the Rockefeller family, and told, you really do good work. You're ready to make good documentaries. Why don't you work for us and help us shape the future of mankind? And according to Aaron Russo, he asked him, he said, well, what is the game plan? What is the agenda? And according to Russo, Rockefeller replied, to microchip the population and have the rich people control the world. So there's the game plan, okay? Of course, they're not going to say, we want to microchip you so we can control you. No, no, no. It's going to be to save the children or to save your favorite pet. There's always going to be some rationale for why they want to use this. Probably it will come in the form of credit. Right now, one of the biggest problems in the credit card industry is identity theft. Somebody using your credit card. So what better way than to say, well, protect your credit by having a chip implanted in your wrist or your forehead or somewhere, your neck. This is very dangerous stuff, because if you ever saw the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, they could make a chip that they could trigger and it could explode, give you an aneurysm and kill you right then. So that's real control. So I think we should be very, very cautious about any effort to microchip the population.
The long-term goal is to tag you, is to make you electronically aware, so that way you are meshed into a network. So when you actually look at the word online, online actually means to be under the direct control or connected to a mainframe. So the semantics, the science of semantics, they tell us what the word means. So when I take an RFID chip, I'm online, I'm connected. A network, what is a network? I'm worked into the net. What is a net? A net is something that catches you or ensnares you. What is the web? World Wide Web. What is a web? It catches, it ensnares.
Without nanotechnology and microchips, they could not build their total central global control system of every man, woman and child on the planet. So it appears when it's necessary.
In Internet Protocol version 4, which is the current web that we have, you had a 32-bit address, which means you have so many IPs and we're basically running out of them, right? So they've created something that's called Internet Protocol version 6. Now what that will do is that will allow for every single product, right, on the face of this earth, including going to grains of sand even and specks of dust, is possible to actually be RFID/EPC tagged. So if we're sitting at this table, that particular bottle would have its own web page, right? That would have its own web page, the table would have its own web page, and I could query that particular product, how it arrived here, who is drinking it in proximity to me because I might have other RFID products. So what you're doing is you're building this meshed world, this Internet of Things, where any object is communicating with any person at any time. But the thing is, who is it communicating to? And the thing that it's communicating to, who are these people? It's Sun Microsystems and it's IBM. And what will they do with this data? So that's what we're saying is, yep, there will always be a benefit approach. The Genome Project, cure cancer, cure Alzheimer's. It'll always cure. I haven't seen any cures. You never will see any cures because that's the lie. It's the benefit approach.
The question now is, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? There have always been those who wish to control mankind, and they see themselves as illuminated to some degree. But this right to control, to dictate, is not something that should be forced upon us. We have the right to free speech, to protest, to stand up and say, we won't take this. There are many who are waiting for a revolution, waiting for the people to riot, to fight back on a physical level. And these people appear to be the very individuals who control us in the first place. If riots take place and the people take this fight to the government, then expect a lot of casualties and little support from those still inside the proverbial box. Many believe this revolution will take a different form, and the fight will be won in other arenas.
We all know this. We all know what's happening. The trick is to get that awareness from deeper levels of self into the conscious mind. Because of course, the human consciousness, it's like an iceberg. I mean, only a fraction of our consciousness is conscious awareness, like me talking to you now. We carry fantastic amounts of information, understandings, awareness at deeper levels of self. And it's bringing it to the conscious mind that is the key. Because this conspiracy overwhelmingly is subliminal manipulation.
I believe, you see, that the so-called Dark Brotherhood, the Illuminati and so forth and so on are not as much a problem as the members of our own community, so-called, who can't get into focus, who continually are fighting, who continually trying to separate and fragment and accuse and debunk and all of these kinds of things. I think we have to clean up our own house first, before we can even take on the common enemy. The common enemy knows this, so they continually perpetuate the agent provocateur, fifth columnist agenda to make sure that we can't get our bows and arrows together, and we can't even find, it's like the Three Stooges running around here.
One of the cul-de-sacs of conspiracy research is you get so focused on the twigs, you can't see the forest. It doesn't matter if they're called the Illuminati or Aunt Ethel's teapot. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they exist and what they're trying to do and how they are manipulating us to make it happen. So, we can talk about names of organizations, and I do, but whether they're called the Illuminati or whether they're called something else really doesn't matter. I mean, we've got to get out of that and into this and see how the things fit together instead of getting so focused, train spotter style, on fine bloody detail. Because I see conspiracy researchers arguing over fine detail. The house is on bloody fire and they're arguing about, what the name is of the door they want to go through to try to call the fire brigade. I mean, excuse me, what are we having this conversation for? The house is on fire. What are we going to do about it?
Kingship is the coming together of all the knights, coming together of all the voices. It's a symposium, because no one person is ever going to have the right idea. Remember, one single leader can either be corrupted or threatened or compromised as well. So it's actually a vulnerable thing to have a single leader, because that's no threat whatsoever to the members of the Black Lodge at all.
Well, there's two ways of facing a problem. There's finding a solution, and we're bloody drowning in them. And there's removing the cause of the problem. There are many levels to the cause of the problem, but the fundamental one is most people are not conscious. They're in mind. They're in body-computer reality. So becoming conscious is vital, because everything comes from that. People say, what do I do? What do I do? Well, become conscious and you'll know what to do.
Firstly, you have to recognise that it's happening. Secondly, you have to then protect the innocents from it. And by that I mean your children around you and those people around you that you love and care for. That's the first place to start, with your children. We have to start with our children. And so I teach my children, when I see something afoot, I will point it out. But I will also teach them a lot of good things too. Balance is all important. Can we overcome the mass manipulation that's ongoing? We can if we all do that. Because our children will grow up and will say, I'm not having that, I'm not watching that. And the viewing figures will go down and the products won't be bought, etc., etc. As it is today, it's obvious that we haven't been teaching our children. It's obvious that we're allowing the stupidity that's within us to overcome the wisdom that's within us.
In a way, the idea of inevitability I find particularly difficult, because it disempowers people. If something's inevitable, then there's nothing you can do about it. I actually think it's beholden on every single person to do something about this, to do something about the future for their children, to fight for the hard-won civilization that we've got here in Britain, which is still a reasonably good civilization, a standard of living compared to other parts of the world.
The solution for our movement is you need to have preventative legislation put into place for microchipping, right? It is a lot harder to overturn legislation than it is if it's not there. So that is the first goal, because once one is microchipped, it's the end. It's like that is just the final frontier. I mean, once the human populace is microchipped, it's over. It's as simple as that. So what I say is, fight the fight on different levels. If you're 9/11 Truth or whatever, it all helps, right? It's all. But the point is when man is reduced to inventory, right, the war is lost. The war is lost.
You know what you need to do to make a contribution to unraveling what's going on in the world. You don't need to ask, what should I do? You bloody know. Mind has to ask, what shall I do? Because it's bewildered. It doesn't know what's going on. Consciousness knows what to do. So becoming conscious is absolutely vital to everything that follows from it, and therefore everything that is necessary to bring down this house of cards which we are currently holding up.